Hey folks, welcome back to the live streams from Pencaitland. We've got a little moment now. Thought I would introduce you to our trusty engineer. Maybe, would you say that you're the most important person here?
Yes.
What do all these knobs do, and why do you need a channel, roughly, right?
So, I think that we were capturing this. I think there's 20 channels on the drums. We're not recording them all simultaneously.
Why does he get more than me?
Because he has more instruments within his instruments.
Damn.
Yeah.
How many does Rich get?
6 channels.
Do I get more than him?
You have 5.
All right. Well, can I have more later? We'll talk about this later.
You can have more later.
I'm not happy about this.
But basically, that's the drums at its most.
Yeah.
We're not recording that every track. So for the kit setup, which I think are in Kass's previous videos, there's kick, 2 snares, 4 toms, overheads, critales, hats, ride, and then 4 room mics.
Okay.
And depending on what track we're going and what aesthetic we're going for, some of these mics we need, some of these mics we don't need.
Yeah.
But it's been set up so that everything's good to go. Same with the piano, which is 4 microphones on the piano and then 2 for the Moog. So stuff like that. So we've kind of got everything patched, so it's just ready to go and turn it on.
Would you mind, and totally fine if not, because there's obviously kind of trade secrets here, but would you mind telling us what all the mics are?
Sure, yeah.
Or any of your sort of favorites?
Why don't we do it in another video and we can wander around?
Sure, actually, that's a great idea. So, okay, so these knobs, you were saying, up or down, volumes, what other stuff can it do?
Well, I mean, we're not actually tracking a huge amount through the desk, apart from the drums. Everything else is coming from the outboard, either tube techs or Neves or UTA, stuff like that, and then all summing. But the desk in this is fundamentally summing and monitoring. We do have some of the drums going through it, snare hats, toms, the ride cymbal, kind of the spot mic-y stuff.
Yeah.
Are coming through this first bucket of things, which are fundamentally just the gains, and some of them have got a little bit of EQ, but it's mostly filtering out bottom end on hi-hats and the ride cymbal because of the complexity of the drum kit and how busy it is in terms of cymbals and microphones. I'm a little bit closer than I'd want to be on the ride cymbal in the hat, so I just filtered out some of the proximity in the bottom end.
Cool. Wow. Okay, and last question then for now. There's lots of rack mount things, including this very fun thing over here, the Space Echo. But what are some of your favourite rack things we've got lying around?
So there's kind of, it's predominantly mic amps, compressors and EQs in here. There's a couple of exceptions.
So just like a guitar, a microphone needs to be amplified.
Exactly, yeah. And then the compressors are the dynamic controls, although I'm using these more for their tone, what they bring to the tone.
Yeah.
For some of these things, I'm not compressing stuff. The music is enormously dynamic and I don't want compression to mess with that.
So there's definitely a creative choice and a colouring of the sound that takes place with these things, and so
the boxes that I'm using are for the colour rather than necessarily the dynamic.
Yeah. Hey, let's clear out. I think you're going to have to do some work in a minute.
Looks like it.
And let's
see you later.
Yeah, we're going to have a little chat with Mr. Rich Harrold. Will you grab my iPad, man? I wanted to show people a little bit of the music. So, Rich, we've been working on Apostrophe.
Yes.
Today.
Indeed.
Which is, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? I'm just going to close these doors.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's based originally on Thelonious Monk's composition Apostrophe. And yeah, I mean, I guess what I do with a lot of these tunes is take a standard that a lot of people know already and kind of analyze what's in there. So, like what kind of harmony is used, what sort of intervals are used in the melody, maybe little rhythmic devices that are there, and then try to build a new piece using those things. So yeah, I guess like the identifying harmonic features of that melody are these 2 minor second intervals separated by a minor sixth, and so that kind of dictates how the harmony feels in the piece. And it's not that I, only exclusively use those intervals. It's just that they're very sort of prevalent throughout and create a sort of a harmonic sort of sound, I guess.
I want to show people this section called C4. There's nothing explosive about it, happily, but you can see that motif a little bit more explicitly developed there. This is a section. Wow, these meters. I was just only looking at the meters now that I'm showing it to people. So 10, 11, 11, 10, 11, 12, 9, 10, 10, 11, 10, 9, 9, 9, 10, 8. So how do we arrive at that? When most people, I'm going to ask you a question that a lot of people have asked us and will ask us. Why don't you just do it in 4 or 1 time signature?
Well, I mean, it's always the goal is that the music sounds cool, right? So it's supposed to sound good. It's supposed to sound interesting. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with you can do a lot of interesting things in 1 meter, and some of our tunes are all in 4. Not many, but a couple. But yeah, one of the things that I find interesting and that we all find interesting are kind of plays with rhythm and plays with time. And so the reason those meters are all changing there, what's actually happening is that each bar has 4 beats, and some of the beats are made of 2 semiquavers and some of them are made of 3. So you get these different combinations, so the smallest possible bar is just 4 2s, and then you get some that are 3 2s and a 1, and you get some that are 2 2s and 2 3s.
I see. So
the pattern of the beats is changing in every one of those bars, and it creates a sense of like there is some continuity because it feels like it's kind of in 4, but the floor is constantly shifting underneath. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, it creates like kind of constant motion.
Yeah, it's constant like stretching and compressing of time, and yeah, it's not in order to be sort of pointlessly cerebral. It's the point is that it kind of sounds good. So some people might think that it does, and some people might think that it doesn't.
I should say it's interesting because musicians. I mean, we are musicians and we know what it's like. We were listening to music yesterday when we had some dinner, and sometimes the intellect engages and we think, what is this? And I want to understand it. And musicians, I find, are the worst for that. We often can't just listen.
Switch off and enjoy it.
Switch off and enjoy it, or indeed not enjoy it and say, I don't like this next tune or next band or next album or whatever. And so those kind of questions do tend to come from musicians, whereas it's been kind of what's the phrase, like encouraging how many punters sort of at gigs and things do enjoy the music and seem to find it accessible when you looking at it and playing it. I go, wow, this might be too much for people, but I find often it's very well received.
I think seeing it live as well and seeing the interaction and the tensions live really probably enhances it as it does for all music. The other thing to say though is that all of that sounds very kind of micro, and certainly a lot of the compositional process is micro in terms of like working out these little details. But another thing that I think we're really conscious of going for is this sense of like a broader sort of form, like a broader composition that starts somewhere and ends somewhere completely different, or ends in the same place but has gone on a journey. I mean, I personally really enjoy listening to music where I'm surprised, and not in a kind of in a sort of banal way, but where things are kind of logically progressing, but there's a really kind of imaginative narrative or something. So I think that's what we're going for a lot of the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Can we talk about concertinas, and then you can have a break? Rich has been hard. We've been doing a lot of piano work this morning. Rich has been working hard, but we're going to attack a piece called Concertinas for Bill. So the moment a lot of people hear that piece, they're going to recognize or think they recognize it. We're allowed to tell people where it started out.
Yeah.
So it's so the piece. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but All Blues from Kind of Blue was the sort of was where the source material was found, which was then used by Rich to sort of recompose the entire thing. It's called Concertinas for Bill. A concertina being Yeah.
Well, the instrument that kind of opens up and closes again. So the concept behind that piece, it's essentially the phrases are supposed to sound like they're in 3 or 6, depending on how you hear the original. But within that kind of false meter, the time is constantly slowing down and then speeding up again. So what's really happening? The mechanics of the piece are that it's actually all moving along really, really quickly, and the beats are comprised of different numbers of semiquavers again. So, for example, the first false beat might be 4 semiquavers long, then the next one 5, and then 6, and then again 5, and then 4. So there's a sense of kind of slowing down of time and then speeding up again. And then maybe the next phrase starts as 5, and then is a 7, and then a 9, and then a
But when you're listening, you'll hear a 4 or a 5, which is quite a long amount of time.
Yeah.
But in order to play it, we have to be thinking of this, like each kind of individual subdivision.
So yeah, I mean, again, the effect it isn't supposed to be a kind of hectic effect. It's supposed to be an effect of this quite sort of slow, fluid sense of time, with these quite kind of long, resonant phrases. It's just that underneath the water, we're all kind of furiously paddling, sort of thing.
Yeah, you're damn right about that. I want to show people some of these chord symbols.
Yeah.
So many of you might be. Let's see. Can you see that? So, for example, here we've got G major 7 over F major. So, for many people, maybe that type of notation might be something that you encounter very frequently. I don't encounter it very often at all, but I think it's called like a polychord, basically. So normally you wouldn't have G major 7 over F major, because the G major 7 has an F sharp, which is sort of an illegal note in F. If you've grown up, one of the first things you learn is a scale, which is 7 notes, and then it must repeat. And I think, classical music education's got a lot to answer for there, for leading us down this false alley. I mean, we can attack jazz education after this. Not that I've been through either of them, so I probably should just butt out. But tell me about this chord, G major 7 over F. And before you do, you can see in green, I've tried to translate it into some of the other ways of thinking about it, or some other little parts of the chord that I can kind of access melodically. So what's that chord? What's that doing there, and how do you play that?
Well, I guess the F sharp is a kind of a sharp, what would be called a sharp 15, wouldn't it? And it's these chords where you have these sort of upper structures over lower structures, they sort of have to work in that configuration. You can't kind of switch. Well, if you switch them around, obviously you can, but you get a completely different sound. But what happens there is that you imagine you've got sort of this solid sort of F and C perfect fifth lower down, and maybe the A, which is the major third, and then the major seventh, which would be the E. If you then play the F sharp next to that E, you've got this nice sort of stable sort of resonant major second interval on the top, which also fits really nicely with the A underneath that, as a kind of a stable sort of chord shape. So I don't know, it's, even though there's a kind of a tension in the harmony there, all of the notes that are pulling against each other are reinforced by other notes in the structure, so it creates a sort of a rich sort of resonant.
So if the engineering is correct,
exactly,
you can create a beautiful shape which defies gravity or something, I suppose, harmonically.
Yeah, and it does have to be, the structure has to be stable, but then then you can stray away from the conventional scale that you might play with that lower structure.
And I think one of the things for me to note about those kind of colours is, don't try and state the entire thing, because you've got a sort of you've got at least 8 notes sounding, which melodically you can't state all of that in one crotchet. I mean, without playing the whole chord. So you just sort of really listen to the sound and enjoy the tension that's there when it's there, or not when it isn't. Let's just see So we've got a couple of people tuning in. Thanks very much. And we've got a question actually, Harold, from Mr. Patrick Smith. Hey Patrick, I'm not sure if you're watching live. This was on the stream yesterday actually, but we didn't get to it. And maybe we'll just close out with this question. But we appreciate you viewers, and please do send questions. If you comment on the YouTube, even if you're not watching it live, or comment on Facebook. We'll get to it in successive streams. We're going to do one tonight. Anyway, Patrick Smith asks, hi, how does the group arrive at its unique sound? Is it mainly experimentation or something more specific? So it's quite a broad question, I suppose. Yeah. Unique sound, shall I say a couple of things?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, I suppose unique sound partially is the instrumentation that we've chosen. We've gone, there's no bass. I'm playing an 8-string guitar, so that I play low, but that doesn't sound like a bass. So that's one thing that influences it. There is experimentation, maybe you can pick up from here when you compose. It's not really experimentation, but
so there's the compositional process, but what usually happens is that it's kind of, a new tune is very much a draft with, probably most of the rhythmic and harmonic stuff there, but it's then brought to a sort of workshopping situation with the trio where there is a lot of experimentation and loads of changes and revisions and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a layered process, I suppose. Yeah.
Hope that answers the question, Patrick. And if it leads to more questions, please do send them. So I've just noticed, looking at this calendar here, that it's a full moon tonight. So don't turn into chickens. See you later, people.